afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Funding Opportunities for VAWA Special Domestic Violence Criminal Jurisdiction, and we will be looking at the CTAS for fiscal year 2017. And get the next slide. My name is Chia Halpern-Beetzel. I will be moderating the webinar and taking questions. Our presenter today is Kelly Gaines-Stoner, the Tribal Advocacy Legal Specialist with the Tribal Law and Policy Institute, and she is also a judge at the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma. We'll be doing a brief overview of the VAWA Special Domestic Violence Criminal Jurisdiction, and then looking at the CTAS application for fiscal year 2017. We'll look at the overview of the application, briefly touch on Purpose Area 2, and we'll be looking a little bit more in-depth at Purpose Area 3 and 5, and go over some general grant writing tips and have time for questions. And again, if any of you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to type them in on your dash here on the right side of your computer. The questions is the third from the bottom, so please feel free to type them in, and I can go ahead and interrupt Kelly in different moments and pose your questions to her, excuse me. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to start the discussion.
Thank you, Chia, and hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar. We're going to be focusing on special domestic violence criminal jurisdiction and the implementation of that, or planning to implement that, depending on where your tribe is. So we're going to be really focusing on Section 904, and it's, again, special domestic violence criminal jurisdiction. And this federal law, it's important to understand that it recognizes, it didn't create anything for the tribe. It released the restrictions that the United States Supreme Court had placed on a tribe's inherent sovereignty. It released those, relaxed them, so that a tribe can exercise its inherent criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians for 3 crimes: domestic violence, dating violence, and violation of a protection order. It gets a lot more complex. We're going to go through some of these, but just know that these, if you look up Section 904 in VAWA 2013, you'll see these 3 crimes and what is required to satisfy these definitions under the federal law.
Kelly, we just got a question. I'm going to answer, read it, and then I'll try to answer it, and then I'll let you help me answer it.
Okay.
The question is, I am wondering if there's truth to the news that the President has either cut funding for this or is shutting down VAWA/OVW offices, etc. So I think what you might have seen was something that came out in the news a week or so ago about a potential budget that the Heritage Foundation put out and could potentially be used by the White House as a blueprint for their future budgets. And that would, I think it had included cutting OVW grants as well as some other offices within Department of Justice and other things. So that, my understanding, as I said, it's a potential blueprint for a budget that the White House is looking at, and it hasn't been officially said that that's what they're going to do. And what we heard from NCAI, because we talked with them last week and they said this would probably be a question that would come up. Our understanding is that the CTAS budget for the grants for the tribes half of it has already been approved through the continuing resolution for the budget that Congress approved, and this was before, I think it might have been before Trump was in office, but so half of the money is, we want to say, pretty much guaranteed, and the other half of the CTAS funding will come up for, I guess, review when the budget goes to Congress, and we don't know what what the administration budget will look like. So Kelly, do you think I answered it?
Yes, I do. I would just like to add just some words of support to the the tribes and the folks that are working around this area in Section 904 and thinking about implementation is that new administrations can be, you know, stressful for folks, but this is federal law, and so in order to strike down federal law, it would take an act of Congress. So it's not something that the president himself could do. So I think, I know for me, and I've been working in the field my entire career, I'm just going to put my head down and I'm going to keep moving forward, and with a good heart, doing what I think I'm supposed to do, and that includes the work that we're doing on this. And I just think it's promising for those of you who are out there who are stressed a little bit, that Turtle Talk just had an article on the nominee for the U.S. Supreme Court that was made by this administration, and listed out a variety of different Indian law decisions which appeared to uphold sovereignty and the rights of tribes. So we won't know what we're facing until we get there, and so in the meantime I think we all have to just keep working towards whatever's best for your tribal community, using these tools as best we can.
Thanks, Kelly. We got one more question about will there be an accessible copy of the webinar, or can one be emailed out? So I will email out the slides for today's webinar within 24 hours, and within 24 hours we will also post a copy of the recording on the TLPI website, and I can send a link to all of those who are registered and attended. So I will get that out within 24 hours. Okay, thank you. I'll turn it back to Kelly.
Okay, and Chia, do I have control of the slides, or are you going to advance them? Yeah, there we go.
I can advance.
Thank you. Yep. Okay, and so when we think about Section 904 and potential areas that a tribal justice system might need in order to implement 904, then we've put those out here for you to be thinking about. Tribes that are in the planning process, even in the beginnings of implementation phase, can kind of look down through this list and see the areas of need that you might want to identify in a grant proposal, and then you would list out the activities that you would need to achieve to address that need. And the first is effective assistance of counsel for defendants. Some tribes have difficulty with resources to pay for that. Some tribes give effective assistance of defense counsel for in criminal cases to all defendants, but 904 is requiring the tribe that wants to exercise this special domestic violence criminal jurisdiction to supply that for criminal defendants who have non-Indian criminal defendants who have been charged with the crime and who are facing jail time. So you can kind of just sort through all of that and all the text of the statute. It can be to get law-trained judges. And remember that Section 904 doesn't require law-trained judges. It requires well-trained judges, I believe. And we do know that the Department of Justice in one of the pilot project tribes approved as a well-trained judge for criminal cases, a judge who had attended the Judicial College and had received several certificates and had years of experience. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a judge who graduated from a law school and passed the bar, but that surely would be sort of that judge would pass scrutiny. You're going to have to make available criminal laws, and for some tribes that's easy. For other tribes it's more difficult. Some tribes are putting them on the internet. Some tribes are making these codes available in public areas within their tribal communities. You have to record the criminal proceedings. The jury pool selection has been a hot topic, so if you need more additional information on what's going to be required or what you might need to do to meet those particular requirements of Section 904, both TLPI and NCAI have great websites on VAWA 2013, and including recorded webinars and a variety of different resources for you for that. Law enforcement training on domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, also to utilize Section 904 if you're moving towards implementation. Don't let law enforcement be the last to know about this because they're going to be an integral part of it. Detention facilities, where you're going to hold the non-Indian. Some tribes contract out with counties using the county detention facility. Some tribes have their own, so you need to be thinking about that. Probation, is your probation authorized to, you know, provide probation services for a non-Indian? Again, a convicted criminal defendant non-Indian. Are you going to be thinking about creating a domestic violence court, which I personally am a big fan of? Domestic violence courts can vary in what they look like, but typically it's going to be a whole separate court that can handle anything that has any type of case, civil or criminal, that has domestic violence in it, or it could be as simple as just criminal cases involving domestic violence, or we could be talking about a domestic violence docket. So for more information on that topic, I would encourage you to visit the TLPI website, because we have some resources on domestic violence courts. We also have a fact sheet you can use to kind of, as you're thinking about, well, what in our tribal community would this work, and what would it look like, and how would it best serve our women and children, our victims, to keep them safe. Also, this is going to probably require code development. When we're thinking about code development, it's much more comprehensive, I think. Chia might agree with me, than we first thought. We have to look at the tribal constitution. We have to look at your civil code for the authority to issue protection orders. We have to look at your criminal code, whether it restricts the tribe from whether it just uses the word Indian or it uses the word person. We want to think about including language that covers, that sort of triggers the federal firearm offense statutes, and we want to be thinking always about victims' rights, because one of the things we know 100% for certain, and you know, these systems, the criminal system is, and the civil system for that matter as well, is really not set up to be victim friendly. And I'm talking about getting protection orders and that sort of thing. So we need to be protecting the victims and making it not so stressful and traumatic for those victims to have to seek help through their tribal judicial systems. So we're going to be talking today about the CTAS, the Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation, and you can find that at this website, I'm thinking, Chia. This used to be grants to tribal governments, for those of you who've been grant writing for a while. It was launched in 2010, and what this boils down to is CTAS is broken down into a variety of purpose areas. They have some overlap, but then there are others that have no overlap. And at the end of the day, the tribe or various tribal agencies decide which purpose areas they're going to apply for, and you have to communicate this to other agencies among the tribe, because the tribe is only allowed to put in one application. It can cover every service area, every purpose area in the CTAS, but one application per tribe. And I believe I've heard OVW say, you know, if the tribe is not conversing within its tribal agencies, and you get one application for purpose area 1, and then later an application for purpose area 3 comes in, that OVW will take the last application submitted. So it's really important that tribal agencies begin to reach out and have a point of contact, a person who knows which other tribal agencies are putting in for which purpose areas, so everyone can get on the same page for that one application submission. Okay, what's included in the CTAS? There's the COPS piece, sort of focusing on community-oriented police services. There's the Bureau of Justice Assistance, OBW is in there, OBC is in there, and OJJDP, dealing with tribal youth issues, is in there. So each one of those is probably going to be a different purpose area. Again, different agencies going after different purpose areas. So again, very important to be coordinated so we get one application at the end of the day. What's not included in the CTAS is OBW Tribal Sexual Assault Services programs. OBW has decided to keep those separate from the CTAS. The tribal technical, the training and technical assistance applications are not included in CTAS. They're separate. Tribal civil and criminal legal assistance under BJA, and non-tribal governmental specific grants. Those will not be included in the purpose areas of CTAS. So to be eligible to put in for a CTAS grant, you have to be a federally recognized tribe. And let me give you a or unless a couple of the purpose areas in the RFP, the CTAS announcement, allows a tribe by resolution to designate or to sort of delegate their authority to put in as the grantee for a purpose area to a different organization, and that has to be done through resolution, and the CTAS puts out the specific steps that a tribe has to do if you want to delegate the tribal authority to put in an application for a particular purpose area. Not all purpose areas will allow that, so you need to check the RFP very carefully. And you also need to understand that if you do delegate your authority under one of these purpose areas, that the organization that the tribe delegates the authority to put in the application for the purpose area, whatever agency that is, that agency, may be tribal, may not, becomes the grantee, not the tribe. Also, tribal consortia, there are 2 or more tribes. They can submit their own independent application so long as the activities are distinct. This application opened November 29th, 2016. That's when it came out, I believe, in the Federal Register. It was put on the website, and it closes February 28th, 2017, and it has a time, a 9 p.m. Eastern time. So that date is upon us. If you haven't started, you have a lot of work to do, and it's going to have to be done quickly and very coordinated. So the RFP itself recommends that the tribe register for the Grant Management System, GMS, no later than February 7th, 2016. And that also has a helpline to it if you run into some difficulties. So if you remember February 7th, you can even do it today. Anytime before February 7th will work. And the Department of Justice expects to award grants no later than September 30th, 2017, but that is, the grant award does not mean the budget will be approved. So let's just make that real clear. Okay, what's new in this fiscal year 2017 CTAS that we want you to know about? The application overview has replaced the executive summary. So the executive summary that you all are used to putting in, if you put these grants in before, is no longer scored. It's no longer a part of the proposal. Now it's an application overview. And each purpose area now requires its own abstract. I don't think the abstract is scored. I could be wrong. There's page number limits to the abstract. And just as a peer reviewer, it's nice when you get a stack of 10 or 15 grants to have a well-written abstract. It's usually 1 or 2 pages. I think it can go up to 5, I'm not sure, but we'll figure that out here in the next few slides. But it's just a nice, tight summary of what the tribal need is, and once the tribe has identified that need, what activities the tribe wants to achieve under this purpose area, and how achieving those activities is going to address, lessen that need that the tribe has identified. In the past, if the history is any indication of what you can expect, and sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't, 2016 there were 215 applications. That's across all purpose areas. 236 awards for $102 million. And you'll see that in 2015, 234 were the application numbers, 191 awards, and 97 million. Here are the fiscal year 2017 CTAS purpose areas that we had talked about earlier. You'll notice one, purpose area 1 is the COPS. Purpose area 2, which arguably could lend itself to a planning for a strategic plan for implementing special domestic violence criminal jurisdiction. So number 2 is interesting for those of us who are really looking at Section 904. If you're in a planning phase or you're just now getting started. Number 3 is the justice system and alcohol and substance abuse. Now the justice system part of purpose area 3 will support an application for implementation of special domestic violence criminal jurisdiction. So 2 and 3 are very important to us. 4 is corrections. 5 is OBWs, and that too will support implementation of special domestic violence criminal jurisdiction or particular components of it. So we're going to be looking today at 2, 3, and 5. 6 is the Children's Justice Act Partnership. That's an OVC. 7 is an OVC Tribal Victim Assistance Program. And 8 is Juvenile Healing to Wellness Courts with OJJDP, and 9 will be OJJDP as well. So for us, we're looking at 2, 3, and 5. Some important things to remember, and I might repeat myself here, but I just want to make sure if you're new at this that you understand it is one grant proposal per tribe. Can be a variety of different tribal agencies putting in for different purpose areas, but in the end it's going to be one grant per tribe. One budget workbook per tribe. And as a peer reviewer, I can tell you what that looks like to me is I get one budget and I can see every purpose area that the tribe has applied for and how much the tribe, each line item in their budget, but I only focus on my purpose area, what I'm doing the peer review for. But again, it's one workbook with all the purpose areas separated out in it. It's important to note as well, OVW has continued, in my opinion, to improve the templates that they provide you, forms, fill-in-the-blank forms to assist in making the grant writing process a little bit more user-friendly. And these templates are provided, so if the CTAS RFP purpose area you are applying for has templates with it, please use those. Know that peer reviewers are given also copies of those templates, and that's what we are looking for. So when you use an old form, an old timeline, an old budget form, something of that nature, it throws everything off. So please update those templates and use the ones that are provided in the RFP itself. Also, I noticed that one of the first things that jumped out at me as I looked through this RFP is in bold print, OBW is saying some items that are required in the grant proposal are marked with a double asterisk. And those are must be included items. And if your proposal does not include one of those items that are marked with a double asterisk in the RFP, it's saying that the OVW is saying the grant may not be considered because it's not compliant. So wherever those double asterisks are, take a highlighter and mark those up. The application itself is going to consist of an application overview, and remember we need one for each purpose area. Tribal community and justice profile. If you've done these grants before, you're pretty familiar with these, but let me say a word about them. Most tribes are going to use the same, all purpose areas will use the same tribal community and justice profile, and it should really paint the picture of why each purpose area is needed and how they're going to fit together and how they're going to address different needs. So it's 30% of the score. It's a very important document So don't leave this to chance for someone to write that may not be familiar with your program or your program needs. So that is a very important piece of this, and all the purpose areas should get a chance to take a look at it and edit it to make sure that their purpose areas are covered in this particular piece of the application. There's the purpose area abstract, purpose area narratives, which again are the bulk of the points. The timelines, there are templates for those, and the workbook, budget workbook, there's a template for those. Now, as you look through this, you should theoretically spend the majority of your time on the most weighty pieces of the application. And the other pieces, that's not to say they shouldn't be as perfect as you can get them, but the bulk of your points are going to come from that 30% and that 50%. This is a nice chart that's put together that I think that helps us to understand, especially those new grant writers, and maybe new to grant writing in Indian country. If your tribe has a grant writing department, some do, some do not. Again, it has to be one tribal justice narrative and one budget workbook that's going in with all the purpose areas in those documents. And then you branch out to the purpose areas, and each purpose area has to have its own attachments as set forth in the announcement. So I think this chart just kind of makes it easy to understand that concept. This is there's an online guide to writing and preparing for the CTAS solicitation. It gives you some tips on how to put the grant together, how to coordinate, how to really articulate and talk about the needs of your community. And let me just say, while we're on this slide, I think most peer reviewers today have some experience in Indian country, but there will be the occasional peer reviewer who does not. And so sort of think about this however you would do this orally, introducing your tribe, talking a little bit about the history of your tribe, where your tribe came from, and some of the cultural practices and beliefs of your tribe. You need to introduce yourself to the reader as if the reader knows nothing about your tribal community. So if you want to explore that tool, we've given you the website, so you can go on there and kind of look around. The application overview, it's got a page limit, and what OVW, the announcement says about the page limit is that if you go over, the peer reviewer doesn't have to consider it. So you want to do your very best to keep it within the page limits that OVW restricts you to. And while I'm saying that, I might as well tell you there's a font that OVW prefers, and there's spacing that OVW prefers, and the more reader-friendly you can make this, the better. In other words, if it's the application overview, that should be the title of this particular piece. And it is I believe it's a template, and it helps you identify the problems, the strategies that you've come up with to address the problems and then the purpose areas. And this would be all the purpose areas. So tribal community and justice profile. You've probably seen this as well. I don't think it's changed that much from last year. It too, I believe, is a template. It describes the tribe's strengths, resources, challenges, and needs. And it has a 15-page limit. Remember, I just said this, the reader may not be familiar with your tribal community. And answer each question. Even if the answer to the question is, I have no idea, you should not write, I don't have any idea. You should write, this particular data set is not available and is not currently being tracked by the tribe or the tribal organization. Something like that, but don't leave anything blank. The tribal community and justice profile. We're going to talk about the form of the tribal government, who governs the tribe, and describe that, in as much detail as you can so that the reader the reader comes away saying, oh, I understand, because it gets a little confusing. Some tribes will have a what they call a tribal council that's made up of all members of the tribe that are 18 years or older, but yet, and they ultimately govern the tribe, but the day-to-day activities of the tribe is governed by a business committee or something of that nature. So explain that out. Describe the tribal justice system. That is so important. Do you have your own tribal court? Is it hearing every kind of case, civil and criminal, or just one type of case? And if it's just one type of case, why? Is it a resource issue? Is it something that the tribal community, you're working your way towards, and this is just a step towards getting to the goal of the tribal community? And some tribes here in Oklahoma still utilize a CFR court, a court of federal regulation. So you need to talk about that tribal justice system. How many judges do you have? Are they graduates from law school who passed the bar, or can they be tribal elders with experience? Describe that as well. Describe the tribal justice, community safety, juvenile delinquency. It's I think the reader's really looking for data here. What is the issue that you're trying to deal with in the particular purpose area, and give your tribal data. I like to start with national data, which is fairly easy to find, especially in the TLOA Senate report and the VAWA 2013 Senate report that supported the enactment of those statutes, TLOA being the Tribal Law and Order Act, VAWA, Violence Against Women Act 2013. There's some really good national statistics in there, but it's imperative that you give your tribal data. And if that data is not being collected right now, give anecdotal data. Give data that the heads of departments are saying that this year we saw approximately this many cases come through, and about this many cases contain domestic violence, if that's the issue you're trying to address. And you can always drop a little footnote there and say who you interviewed. Don't leave the data part out, though. Describe current and future plans to address the issue, and anything else you can think of there that's identified in the RFP. The timeline's worth 5%. It should not be underestimated, though, because the peer reviewers look to these timelines in part to see if the tribe is organized and has well thought out the activities that they are going to set forth to address this need. The timeline must cover the entire project period, which is 3 years. The objectives and major tasks that have to be achieved in order to address the need. Who's going to be responsible for each of these? Remember, this is taxpayer money, so we want to be able to say, okay, we see they're going to do these 17 things or 10 things, and each one of them, they've already thought about who's going to be responsible for these. And it's important because the RFP says that these tasks that you're listing in your timeline, you have to list them, you get to choose, but you have to list them by year and month or quarter. So you've got to do 3 years worth there. And you should do a separate timeline for each purpose area. Here is the template of the timeline. You can kind of look at that and see it's got months down here. And remember, we've got 36 months we're going to have to cover. You can kind of read across the top there. And I do want to say, remember in that timeline, the activities that you come up with have to be directly linked to the need, the objective you're trying to achieve, to address whatever this need is in Indian country that you've identified in the purpose area. All of these activities must tie back to you being able to address that need in the tribal community. Next comes the budget detail workbook, 15%. Again, a template. I would strongly encourage you all to use that template. It includes a demographic form, a budget detail worksheet, and a budget narrative. Let me say a word about the budget narrative. When you get to the budget narrative part and you're listing out in a line item what you need, we're going to do, let's say we need 4 computers, when you get to the narrative part, you need to explain why do you need 4 computers to achieve your objective. And it can be something as simple as these computers are going to be used by these particular offices to reach the grant goals and objectives. We have no computers that are updated to do this. So be thinking about that, because that budget narrative is very important. And it's also somewhat helpful if you can cut and paste your parts of your budget narrative out of the grant itself, so that the reader says, oh, I remember reading that in the grant. Oh, I remember reading that, and I can understand why they would need these things. Only 1 workbook per application again, and there is a template that's downloadable and fillable, and you find that on GMS. Here's a copy of the demographic form, and it too is fillable. So you can pull this down, and you're going to just fill out the blanks here. Here's what the template looks like for the budget narrative and the worksheets. Again, don't let this throw you, because they're user friendly. You just fill in the blanks, and then the cursor will move over to the next field. And here's a budget summary, as I was talking about earlier. You can see this is what the peer reviewer is going to say, that, you know, if a tribe has applied for all these 9 purpose areas, we're going to get to see the budget. Not that we particularly use it. We really focus in on the purpose area that we are assigned to peer review. But we can look down here and see the budget. Required attachments, and I'm sure these are double asterisked in the RFP. The tribal authority to put in for the grant. If you've got Mary Smith submitting a grant for the Deer tribe, which is a tribe I just made up, and it's a federally recognized tribe, and we don't know whether Mary Smith has any authority. What is her title? Does she have the authority to even put in for these grants? I think the peer reviewer needs to know that. I've seen peer reviewers question that. If you're a high risk status, and that would be a tribe that's been in some financial difficulties perhaps, or other sorts of maybe meeting goals and objectives, you would know if you're high risk. And if you don't know, I think you could call the OVW office and ask where you would find that out. Disclosure of any other pending applications that you're putting in. Disclosure of any lobbying activities that the tribe's involved in. An indirect cost rate agreement, and it needs to be the most recent if you have an indirect cost rate agreement. And the financial management and system of internal controls questionnaire also has to be filled out, and that's also a template. Other possible attachments, if they are requested by the particular purpose area you're applying for. Letters of support, resumes of key personnel. Usually if you're asking for a job position to be filled, you need a resume and a job description. So, and sometimes you have to go to different tribal agencies to get those. Other times you've used same ones from the past. So be sure that those are put in there as an attachment, and MOUs if requested and required with your proposed partners. And there's usually some sort of template for an MOU as well. Now with all of that, we get to the purpose areas. And this is purpose area 2, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one, but I think it's worth at least mentioning. This purpose area appears to me, as I read this language on the slide, is for tribes that are looking at, and just at the beginning phases of strategically planning to improve their tribal justice and community wellness programs. And see here that it says including activities outlined in the Tribal Law and Order Act. That would be important to us. So if you are just in the beginning phases and you need some time to plan and coordinate, identify even the tribal agencies you need to coordinate with, and get everyone to the table and start working on this together, this might be a purpose area that you would look at. And there's a note there that this purpose area 2 is intended to assist tribes with system-wide strategic planning. System-wide, not just one little area. So to me, when I'm thinking about this in the realm of special domestic violence criminal jurisdiction, I'm thinking about a tribe that's thinking at the very beginning phases, they're thinking of possibly code review. They're thinking of, well, we might want to think about a domestic violence court, which is going to cross over into our victim advocacy programs and our law enforcement programs and our court system and the court personnel that support the court system. It's going to touch on our tribal judges and our probation system. It's going to be system-wide. So that's where I would be thinking purpose area 2. We're going to spend most of our time talking about 3, and this kind of comes into focus here. The project abstract for purpose area 3 is, again, it's going to be short and tight. It's so much easier to write a very long document than it is to write a very short, tightly worded document. I always start out with probably 5 or 6 pages and then try to boil it down to whatever I'm supposed to have, because it's difficult to really write it tightly and have everything in there you need in there. So abstract should be written for a general public audience, just any peer reviewer that picks it up that's assigned to peer review. It should be labeled as a project abstract as a part of its file name. And think of this. I'm a peer reviewer. I have 20 applications or 15 applications to read in 3 or 4 days, and I've dropped one and it wasn't stapled. And now I have to put it all back together. It's so much easier if a part of the file name, the header, says project abstract. The instructions are to do single space with the 12-point font, preferably Times New Roman with 1-inch margins. If you don't know how to do that, there's probably a techie. Look for someone young in your office, and they probably know how to do that. I know sometimes I struggle. The applicant name is going to be there. Again, this is just sort of looking at the project abstract. And note that it will not be scored, but it's still very important. It's sort of the first page that a peer reviewer might look at, even though it's not scored. We're looking to say, I'm looking as a peer reviewer to say, okay, what is this tribe saying its need is, and what activities the tribe is going to try to address this need. That's where I get my first sort of inkling of what's to come in the rest of the grant proposal. Purpose area narratives, there has to be a separate narrative for each purpose area. I've already mentioned that. Template questions, it's going to include problem identification and how are you going to solve it. That's the same as need. Project program design and implementation, this is how you're going to set it up. Capabilities and competencies, give us the money and we know how to handle this money, and also we have the personnel, or we're going to hire the personnel to carry this out, and we're showing you we're capable and we're going to be competent as we do this. And the impact, outcomes, and evaluation is how we being the applicant, are going to show you whether we succeeded or not. And don't forget those templates, and this has to be 15 pages. Or it doesn't have to be 15 pages, that's the most it can be. Here's purpose area number 3. You can see the money that's going to be available, the estimated number of awards. Again, 103 for purpose area 3 only. 103 last year, and 27 awards went out. So some of the language that tends to lend itself to special domestic violence criminal jurisdiction is to develop, enhance, and continue tribal justice systems. And implementing, right there in black and white and bolded, it's going to say implementing TLOA, Tribal Law and Order Act, or Special Domestic Violence Criminal Jurisdiction. So clearly number 3 is a good match. The narrative, 15-page limit, we've talked about before, and note that these answers should be double-spaced. So some parts of the grant are going to require single spacing and some are going to require double spacing. Please make sure that you pay attention to that, because it really sends a message to the reader that you read it very carefully and that you are, doing your best to make it reader-friendly for the peer reviewer on the other end. So you can kind of look down through and what's included there. And then we move to Purpose Area 5, and you can see it's $32 million. The estimated number of awards, approximately 60 up to 450 per award, and up to 900. That's for new grantees, and up to 900,000. That doesn't mean that you're going to get 900,000, but if your budget says 900,000, that's the max for current grantees, and it's 3 years in length. And there is some language also in the RFP that tells you if you are who they consider a current grantee, and if you have some funds left, you go through this little formula here. If you've got so many dollars, you're eligible to apply for so much of the funding, and so on and so forth. So be sure that you read that carefully. Again, to remind you, give you some sort of idea about Purpose Area 5, in 2016 there were 76 applications and 54 awards. Goals and objectives. Okay, this is an area that can get a little sticky if you don't know the difference between a goal and an objective. And I don't know that has been made clear. Some grants I read, I'm not sure that the writer knows the difference, but to me, as a peer reviewer, and you can look up the definitions of these terms as well, a goal is an overarching, task or philosophy that you're trying to achieve, such as reducing domestic violence in our tribal community. That would be a goal. And the objectives are the very specific activities that you are going to carry out. And if you carry them all out, theoretically, you will reach your goal. I hope that makes sense, because sometimes I get myself confused talking. So some of the goals and objectives for the for OVW is you can draft or revise tribal codes. That would be your goal, and then you would talk about how are you going to do that. We are going to reach out or have an MOU with a particular organization, or we're going to assemble a tribal judicial or tribal code review team. Those sorts of things would be your objective. There can be funding for dedicated victim advocates. You can read through that list there. Training for dedicated victim advocates, law enforcement, and trust me, training is always an issue. Always, always, always. We need funding, we need training. Provided legal advice and representation to victims of crime. So you can get a lawyer that's going to represent victims of crime, or someone who's going to provide legal advice. In some tribal communities, that can be a lay legal advocate. Develop and promote legislation and policies that enhance best practices in responding to violent crimes against Indian women. One of the things that comes to my mind is I still hear anger management. It's got to go to anger management, and some tribal statutes will say that. That is not a best practice anymore. Now it's about our intervention program. It's usually court ordered. It usually lasts for at least 52 weeks. So this is a chance for you to update and go back and do some research on what are best practices, and then for the nation, and then you have to tailor those to your tribal community. Notice that OVW funds cannot be used to fund criminal defense attorneys. So that's one area that you would have to fund from a different purpose area if you don't already have funding for that. Applicants may apply for funding for strategic planning. This again is a little bit of an overlap for 2, but Purpose Area 2's whole focus is strategic planning. So you would do 3 years of strategic planning under Purpose Area 2. Under this one, you could do some strategic planning, staffing, victim services, and you can kind of read down through that list. And don't forget customs and traditional practices. If that's important to your victim's healing and the healing of your tribal community, that needs to go in there. Okay, when we talked a little bit earlier about who's eligible to apply, I mentioned that if you had received an OVW grant in certain years, and if you still have certain amounts of money left, you may or may not be eligible to apply. So you want to read this information very carefully, and you want to also note to put in for this particular purpose area, you are required, double asterisk, required to partner with, if you are not an Indian Victim Service Provider organization, so someone that has their purpose as providing services to victims in Indian country, or you can partner with a tribal domestic violence or sexual assault coalition. We have a number of those that you can find those on the website, or if you go to www.tribalcoalitions.org, there's a list of tribal coalitions there. It'll show you the state and the contact number. Or you can have an advisory committee put together if you know, and sometimes may not have access to all of those things. So an advisory committee that is comprised of individuals that I would hope at least one would be a victim, but you could put together, you know, victims, law enforcement, whoever you feel it needs to be on this committee to advise the folks carrying out the grant activities about victim safety and whether this is reaching the goals and objectives. The application must reflect sound strategies to enhance victim safety and offender accountability. And let me say a word about this. This is the issue with having grant writers who don't work in the field of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking write your grant proposals. Oftentimes, those individuals who are not boots on the ground working with victims advocates, those sorts of things, those sorts of victim service-related issues, are not aware of activities that compromise victim safety or compromise confidentiality, which also compromises victim safety. So at a minimum, if you have a professional grant writer, I would suggest that before the proposal is put in, that the victim advocacy or victim service provider or tribal coalition, someone with experience working with victims and victim safety issues and batterer accountability issues in this area of the law, look those over. In this area of the law in the tribal community, look those over. The RFP lists discouraged activities, and as a peer reviewer, we're circling those. So, you know, we're always focused on confidentiality. How are you keeping it private? Are you going to be sharing it? Is there a way from that batterer to get a hold of any of it? And we're also concerned about victim safety. The narrative for Purpose Area 5 also has a 15-page limit. It says double spacing. So you can read down through here and you get all of these very tightly worded instructions on exactly what they're asking for. And if you give OVW what they're asking for in each one of these questions, the peer reviewers will be so happy, because we actually get a check sheet that reflects everything OVW is asking for. That's how we're gonna score these grants. Some common mistakes: not responding to all the requested information, leaving things blank. Here's a big one. You don't draw a connection between the issues that you've stated in the tribal community and justice profile that need to be corrected or addressed and what you say you're going to do in the grant. There has to be a direct connection, and in my opinion, you need to say it several times during the grant application. Wherever you feel it's appropriate, you say this is connected to the barrier or the need, the problem identified in the tribal community justice profile by, and then say how it's connected. If you don't provide requested information in the section where it's asked for, it forces the peer reviewer to look at 15, 20 pages worth of text to try and find it. So peer reviewers love to get those grant proposals where you're actually putting the information in the section where it's asked for. Again, drawing that connection between the need you have identified, the problem in the tribal community you're trying to address with this purpose area, and the activities that you are asking for money for. Inconsistencies within the proposal. This happens often when, let's say, we're going to put in for purpose area 5 and we've got 5 different people writing it. And we're using different words. We might say director in one, we might say instructor in another, we might say the supervisor in another, when we're all referring to the same person. And it gets very confusing for the peer reviewer. Do not provide specific measurable targets. Oh, you did not provide. So we have to know how at the end of the day, how are you going to measure specifically? How are you going to measure whether this grant worked or not, whether you met the goals and objectives or not? So read the solicitation carefully. Check all of the resources available on the CTAS website. You can do some research online also to get those national statistics. Use the scoring criteria as a guide for how many pages you're giving to each section. Again, some are much weightier than others. Don't wait until the deadline to apply. This is not the sort of thing that you're going to stay up till midnight the night before, most of us anyway, and we're not going to turn in a wonderful product. And this is competitive. Follow all format directions. Use the number of pages that you're allowed. Use the font you're allowed. Use the spacing that you're told to use. And go back and review the tribal community and justice profile. After completing the purpose area narratives, someone needs to be appointed to go back to that particular piece of the proposal and make sure that it's addressing each purpose area that the tribe is applying for. Go back and review the budget, and if you use this budget form, it's wonderful because it tabulates. In the olden days, we had to get our calculators out and forever making math calculation mistakes. This tabulates those for you. Focus on the attachments. Make sure that also, you're putting in a header or something. This is attachment to purpose area 5, tribal resolution. Make it easy for the person, the peer reviewer who drops everything, to put this back together and send it as a PDF, and you save a copy for yourself. If you are unsuccessful, and I know most of you will not be, but if you are, always ask the agency, such as OVW or OVC, whoever you apply to, ask the agency to see your peer review comments. Keep those comments, even though you get a different set of peer reviewers each time. Keep those to see if you can see a common theme coming through in the comments. Ask the agency what other services can be provided to help you strengthen your application. Is there training and technical assistance available for you as you put in your next proposal? Are there workshops you can go to learn more about writing grants? Those sorts of things. And you can also ask the agency for copies of successful applications. Yes, you can ask for those proposals that were funded, so you can go in there and see what those proposals contain that yours did not. You can also register to be a peer reviewer, and a peer reviewer is a team that is selected based on their expertise in a particular area that OVW assembles to read and score grants. And trust me, as a peer reviewer for many years, it makes you a better grant writer when you have to read through all of these grants and you have your little score sheet. It makes you a better grant writer. You will understand what a peer reviewer is looking for once you've gone through that process. And if you have any additional questions, or questions come up after the webinar, or you weren't able to join us today and you're listening to the webinar at a later time. Here's Chia's contact information. Chia knows how to get a hold of me as well. And we'd be happy to work with you and try to answer any questions that you might have. We wanted to end too with having some resources for you to actually get on and look at now. This is a TLPI resource here, and there's the website there. And this is the NCAI website that I also referred to early on. Both have webinars, both have they're just a wealth of information on implementing or getting ready to implement special domestic violence criminal jurisdiction. Just so much information. You can see the questionnaires from the pilot tribes, how they answered certain questions, what their needs were, all of those sorts of things. And that's a great resource when you're trying to put together a grant proposal. So Chia, I'm going to turn it back over to you to see if we have any questions.
I just got someone that wanted to go back to my contact info, so I will go back to that with my email address. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to email me and I can try to get you in touch with, if we can't answer it, then we can try to get you in touch with one of the grant managers that will be working on those purpose areas, and they might be able to have a little bit more insight than us if we can't get the question answered. So feel free just to ask me anything, and I will try my best to get you connected to somebody if I myself or Kelly cannot answer it.
And I would just add, while you're waiting to see if there are any questions out there, there's always a great idea to have someone else take a read of your grant proposal. You work on it for so many hours that sometimes you will have glaring errors in it and you won't be able to see them because you know what you meant to say, and sort of your eyes are tricking you that that's exactly what it says, and you think you've said it very clearly. And when you have someone else read it, they can point out to you, well, I don't understand what you mean here, I don't understand what this is saying, and you can go back and clarify those sorts of things.
Well, I don't see any other questions. I will email out copies of the PowerPoint slides and email out a link to the recording of the webinar if you know someone who might want to, take a look at it, or if there's something you missed that you want to go back to. So within 24 hours, I will get that out to all of you. And
Chia, would you go ahead and give the due date again? I feel like we need to re-emphasize that, because I think if you haven't started on it, don't let another day go by that you aren't working on it, because it's coming up so closely. I think it's the 28th of February.
Yeah.
At 9 p.m. Eastern. And,
yep.
and again, to say, Chia, do you want to say a word about the GMS and why you don't want to wait till the last minute for that?
Right. Usually a number of individuals are trying to get online to GMS and submit their applications all at the last minute, which we totally understand, but it can cause backup and delays, and you don't want your application not to get in. So if you can submit it a little bit earlier and register earlier, it's good to get all that stuff done.
And it might be just a good tip is to write that helpline number down, because I've had to call it more than once myself.
Right. I don't think we have it up here, but it's, yeah, the GMS help. It should be on the RFP. So take a look at the application. And if you think of something, feel free to contact us since we don't have any questions. And I just want to wish you all the best of luck with this. Again, just take into account what Kelly mentioned about the funding issues. We have to move forward with business as usual, I think, at this point, and just keep doing good work in Indian country.
Let's just keep working hard and with a good heart doing what we know we're supposed to do. And I would encourage everybody, though, if you're at that planning phase, even at the implementation phase, I don't think it's too late, is to visit the issue of the domestic violence court. And again, we have that fact sheet online at tlpi.org. And if you have any questions about the domestic violence court, please email Chia and we can get you some additional information.
Yes, so thank you all for joining and have a great day today. Thank you, Kelly, for presenting, and good luck with everything. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye, everybody.